I had always been obsessive about order. My sketchbook was a cathedral of precision, every pencil stroke executed with unwavering control, every margin eternally blank, every page a testament to my discipline. Art wasn't just a hobby, it was my identity. So when, midway through my second semester at the Art Institute, I discovered a crude, jagged sketch on page 42, beneath my charcoal study of a marble bust, I was certain it was a hallucination. I flipped back and forth between pages, unwilling to believe that a figure, slumped in misery with its head buried in its hands, had appeared in my carefully maintained margins. I chalked it up to sleep deprivation, dutifully erased it, and pressed on with my work. The next day, however, the sketch was back, identical in every detail. The curve of the spine, the droop of the shoulders, the way the knees pressed forward. My pulse quickened. I rifled back to page 37. There it was again, a grinning face stretched into too many teeth, its sunken eyes hollow and mournful. When I turned to page 45, I found the outline of a hand with elongated fingers reaching skyward. I slammed the book shut. The lecture hall blurred as I fled the room. In the sanctuary of my cramped apartment, I tried to rationalize. Perhaps one of my classmates had borrowed my sketchbook, leaving their doodles in the margins. But then, during a late-night life drawing session, I sketched the model in a pose nearly identical to page 42's hunched figure, palm pressed to brow, elbow jutting toward the ceiling. My heart pounded as I closed my eyes and replayed the margin drawing. Opening them, I caught the model's gaze in the mirror, her lips curved in a slow, knowing smile, as if she too recognized something I could not explain. That night, sleep deserted me. I lay on my futon, drawn to stare at the closed sketchbook on the nightstand. At 3 a.m., I sensed a soft thud. The book had slid to the edge as though nudged. My throat tightened. With trembling fingers, I opened it. On the blank verso page was a fresh drawing, a circle of 10 figures, hand in hand, their faces obscured, surrounding a yawning black void. My breath caught in my chest. I hurled the book across the room. Morning brought no relief. I rushed to class empty-handed, dread coiling in my stomach. Returning to my drafting table at break, I found only a single page left, the same circle, now detailed with grotesque clarity. Each figure's eyes were sunken, their mouths stretched into agonized rictuses. In the center stood a solitary silhouette, my posture identical, holding the sketchbook aloft. I staggered back, clutching my chest. The faces seemed to leer at me with silent accusation. I abandoned the institute that day, leaving behind my sketchbooks and charcoal. Weeks passed in a haze of anxiety. Even a notebook page triggered panic. Yet the memory of those margin figures clung to me like a curse. One evening, months later, I found myself staring at a fresh blank sketchbook. My resolve crumbled. My hand shook as I reached for a pencil. I couldn't bear the thought of creating anything. In that moment of hesitation, a faint line appeared in the corner of the page, a single, quivering stroke, as though drawn by an unseen artist. When I signed the lease for apartment 3B on West Elm, I thought I'd found my haven. A modest 4-unit complex shielded by overgrown hedges, rent so low it felt like a fluke, and a neighborhood quiet enough to drown out my anxieties. I spent my first week painting the walls a soothing sage green, stocking the built-in shelves with succulents, and installing vintage Edison bulbs. At night, I would curl up on my leather armchair, sipping tea and listening to the apartment exhale contentment. Then came the first note. It was a pale blue sticky slapped on my doorknob. "You're so loud, tone it down." My skin prickled. I closed the window. I hadn't been more than a whisper above normal. Removed it, convinced it was a prank from a neighbor. But the following morning, another note. "Stop tapping your keys." The next night, "Your laughter is annoying." By the week's end, silence by 8 p.m. Each message was typed in the same sterile font on identical sticky notes. I reported it to the building manager, who shrugged and claimed not to know my downstairs neighbor. He moved out months ago. That revelation hit like ice. My neighbor, the one whose mail slot was perpetually crammed with yellowed envelopes, he was gone, or so they said, but the notes persisted. I kept my windows shut, phone on silent, even tiptoed through my own apartment. A squeaky floorboard felt like a declaration of war. I stopped lighting candles and dimmed my lamps to a faint glow. The building's silence pressed in on me, a blank canvas waiting to be defaced. Then, at precisely 2 a.m. one Friday, I woke to nails scratching across wood. My heart thundered as I sat up, listening to the deliberate, maddening scrape. I flicked on the hallway light and flung open my door. Nothing but empty corridor and the glow of the single bulb hanging overhead. I stepped out, peered into the darkness. My breath caught. The note ID left on my own door hours before, a polite reminder to collect my mail, had vanished. Fear rooted me in place. I retreated inside and sealed the door behind me. Over the next days, I barely ate, barely slept. Grocery runs became sprints. On the third night, I returned home to find my door standing ajar. Hands shaking, I pushed it open. Inside, the apartment had been reconfigured with clinical precision. The sofa was pressed against the opposite wall, books stacked by height, picture frames face down. In the center of the coffee table lay one final message, scrawled in thick black charcoal. Now it's perfect. Nausea smashed me. Blind with panic, I packed under the dull glow of a single lamp, stuffing clothes into bags without thought. By dawn, I emptied my life onto the curb. Half-hung photographs, my favorite rug, a cracked vase. As I slid the last box into my car, an envelope fluttered from beneath my old door and drifted down the hallway. I watched it skid to a stop, half opened, its contents unseen. I didn't look back. After my last relationship crumbled, I needed to disappear. I packed my battered Jeep with camping gear and drove 6 hours up winding mountain roads to Clearwater Lake, a remote retreat where cell signals evaporated and only the forest answered. As the sun dipped below the peaks, I pitched my blue dome tent at the water's edge, its door facing the glassy surface. I built a small fire, its pop and hiss echoing across the darkening water. For a few precious hours, I felt peace. But just as the embers dimmed, I heard it, a gentle plink, 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 rolling across the lake from the far shore. I froze, marshmallows skewered above the flames. Shining my flashlight across the water revealed nothing but reeds and the trembling reflection of pine silhouettes. I told myself it was drifting pebbles or a beaver slipping off a rock. Yet the pattern persisted. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, 3, with mechanical precision that no creature could replicate. My heart thudded in my ears. I zipped into my tent, but the plink ng followed, louder, closer. At 2 a.m., I risked unzipping the flap. Moonlight danced on the lake. Everything was still, but for the rasp, low and metallic, like iron dragged across stone. Goosebumps blossomed on my arms. I slammed the flap shut, teeth chattering. Sleep fled entirely. Dawn brought resolve. I set off on a ragged trek around the lake, boots sinking into the loamy soil. No inlet, no stream, only the same reedy shore. Then, near a stand of willow trees bowing toward the water, I found footprints, barefoot, delicate, each toe etched perfectly into the damp ground. They led into the grove, then vanished as though the earth swallowed them whole. My breath hitched. That evening, I prepared my phone for audio recording and stationed myself at the water's edge, hands trembling around a flashlight. Summoning courage, I lobbed 3 stones in rapid succession. Plop, plop, plop. The reply was instantaneous. 4 splashes, then 8. then the chilling rasp that reverberated like a scream muffled by water. I swept the beam across the lake and, for a heartbeat, saw it. A tall, gaunt figure rising from the depths, limbs dripping, head cocked as though appraising me. I fled to my car at first light, leaving camp and canoe behind. As the forest thinned and the road opened, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. There, on the far shore, the figure stood motionless, water dripping from its limbs like tears. Around it, 6 concentric ripples pulsed outward, a silent farewell to the world I'd abandoned. I haven't dared camp alone since.